Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. This 30-minute podcast features a new author interviewed by me every single day, 365 days a year, for about 30 minutes. I am also the publisher for Zibby Books, which publishes 12 books a year in fiction and memoir. Our books are already out now. You can check it out on zibbybooks.com. And we have a magazine called Zibby Mag, where we have lots of wonderful essays and lifestyle features. That's at zibbymag.com. We have classes at zibbyclasses.com. And I recently opened a bookstore in LA called Zibby's Bookshop at 1113 Montana Avenue at 11th Street in Santa Monica. I hope that you are able to enjoy some of our other offerings. But this here podcast is the basis of all of it and started in 2018. And no matter what I do, this is basically my favorite thing. Enjoy. We are thrilled that Moleskine is partnering with us again on another one of our Zibby Books titles, Hell If We Don't Change Our Ways. You can get 15% off paper and bags with free personalization with the purchase of a notebook. The code is Zibby, all caps, Zibby. The notebooks, we're doing some custom notebooks for some of our books, which are absolutely gorgeous. You should definitely get a new Moleskine journal. You can personalize them for your kids or your spouse, give them as gifts, and just go check them out. Check out their website, moleskine.com. And again, you can get 15% off everything paper-related and bags, and get some free personalization while you're at it. Again, that's code Zibby, moleskine.com. Thank you to Moleskine. Brittany Means is the author of Hell If We Don't Change Our Ways, a memoir. Brittany Means is a writer and editor living in Albuquerque, New Mexico, a graduate of Iowa's MFA nonfiction writing program. Brittany has received several awards for her work, including the Magdalena Award and the Grace Paley Fellowship. Her other talents include doing horror movie screams and baking ugly but delicious cakes. Hell If We Don't Change Our Ways is the Zibby book release for October. I am obsessed with this book. We won it at auction. I read it on a flight and could not believe how much I loved it. I was riveted. I can't believe everything Brittany's been through and the way that she writes about it. And it is just pure art. I hope you all love it as much as I do. Please go buy the book. You will love it. Give it to a friend. It's tough. It's beautiful. It's life. And it's just sensational. Sensational literature. Welcome, Brittany. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss Hell If We Don't Change Our Ways, a memoir by you.
Thank you so much for having me here.
So amazing to be here because I remember reading the submission for this book on my flight and just being like, this is the best book ever. Oh my gosh, we have to get this book. And then fighting for it and getting it. So I feel like this was a hard one and it came out of such a place of passion and enthusiasm from us to you. So here we are with it in a hardcover form. So it's very exciting.
I know, surreal.
Surreal. Yeah, surreal is a better word, which is why you're the good writer over here. So anyway, for people who don't know what Hell If We Don't Change Our Ways is about, can you tell them, please?
Yeah, of course. So Hell If We Don't Change Our Ways is my memoir about growing up homeless and vagrant with my mom. We lived in a car for a while. We were running from her abusive boyfriend. We stayed with my grandparents sometimes, who were like Southern Pentecostals, and we stayed in shelters. Eventually, I moved in with a foster family until I left for college. So it's kind of the arc of all of the places we tried to go and how we both got out and processed what happened.
So it can't be that easy just on an ordinary Monday afternoon to have to spill your life story repeatedly. Every time someone asks you what your book is about, to have to like go into the depths of things that you carried with you for so long. How public were you with new people you met, for example, with your whole backstory?
I come from a long line of oversharers, so it doesn't bother me really. I think the only time I felt a little self-conscious about it is when it came up at work, when someone was like, "Oh, I heard you had a novel published." I was like, "Kind of." And then, yeah, the people you work with every day, you watch their faces slowly, like, "You, the person who sends us chicken pictures?" I send pictures to everybody all the time. Yeah, it's just that thing where you have a pet and you love them so much that they're doing absolutely nothing, but you're still like, this is the most beautiful thing.
How many chickens do you have?
I have 5. Yeah.
Do they have names?
Yeah, I have Ludwig van Beethoven, Johann Sebastian Bach. There's Brittany Jr. and Stephen Wing is our rooster. And then I named one after my brother. His name is Benjamin White. So we named her Henjamin Flight, but we call her Henji.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's really funny. I love it. Okay. Tell me about your whole writing career, essentially. I know you went to Iowa, but how old were you? And I'll call it a career, even if you're like 5 years old or something. But when did you write your first anything and what was it?
I remember we wrote poems in elementary school. I think I might have been in the first or second grade. And I was just really like, my mom wrote poetry and she used to read it to me. And my grandma told stories and wrote little stories. So I already kind of had that background. And I really liked that things could rhyme. And I think the first thing I ever wrote was something like, I don't have a dad, and that makes me sad, which I really wasn't sad about. I just liked that it could rhyme. And I showed it to my grandma and she cried because that was something that really bothered her, is that I grew up without a father. And I felt bad for making my grandma cry, but I was also like, words are powerful. You can make your grandma cry with them. So yeah, I started writing poetry, and I mostly wrote poetry until college.
Wow.
Yeah, it eventually got a little bit better than I don't have a dad, and that makes me sad.
But there's a lot of truth in that. I mean, short, to the point, simple.
Yeah.
Effective.
Concise.
Concise, exactly. So then you transitioned from poetry to prose. How come?
Mm-hmm. I had a creative writing class in high school with a teacher named Kenneth Barrett. And I share his name because he was the first teacher to pull me aside and tell me, like, you're good at writing. You should keep writing. And it was like a revelation for me because I didn't really think I was good at anything in particular. Like, I was good at spelling tests, but it's not the same as being good at writing. And so I started doing more poetry, and then he assigned, like, tell us a story about your life or write a short story. And that's when I really started branching out and doing more of that stuff and doing it more on purpose, because before that it was just something I did. And then the idea that it was something I could do and be good at was like, well, now I want to write so much.
Yeah. Let me just keep doing this over and over again. Wow. So then you decided, just take me through your whole life story. So I know what happened in high school. I mean, we follow along with everything that happened to you in the book, but not necessarily everything the output from you and where you were thinking about writing itself. So then what happened?
Well, I went to Ball State, and originally I studied social work. I wanted to be in child protective services just because I dealt with them so much as a kid. And I had this idea, like, if I did it, I would do it different. But then in my first year, I learned a lot about the limitations on social work and just how broken the system is. And I met quite a few social workers who came and visited classes, and they were all like so tired and talking about like empathy fatigue and compassion fatigue. And I really didn't want to lose what made me want to go into social work. And around the same time, I was going to do a creative writing minor. And I had a class with Jill Chrisman, who has an amazing memoir called Dark Room. 2 more books, I believe. One just came out recently. But she also took me aside after I wrote an essay, and she was like, Brittany, you're a writer. And she said it with like a capital W. And I was like, I'm not just good at it, but I'm also a writer. So then, yeah, I got out of social work and I moved over to creative writing. And yeah, I started taking all of the creative writing classes. I took a novel writing class, the nonfiction class, the poetry. They added like a film and screenwriting minor, and I did that. I just wanted as much writing as I could get.
Wow. So then the fact that you have this book is sort of no surprise to you.
It's still a surprise. Like, it's right in front of me, and sometimes I look at it and I do a double take. I'm like, a book? Me?
Oh, it is such a good book, though. It's so stunningly beautiful. And you can really tell the poetry background, tell that you have a poetry background, because the sentences themselves are just beautiful. Like the way you talk about anything, and even how some chapters are shorter than others, and the way that it all sort of like aligns on the page, and all of this. Maybe I should read. Can I read like a little something?
Oh, go for
from it, just to show people how amazing you are. Well, here, I'm just going to read this because it's an example of one of these sort of intermezzo, sort of little pieces in between some of the other sections. Its place remembers it no more. IN-67 stretches diagonally across Indiana like a seatbelt. All that time I spent thinking it would take us far away, and it turns out it doesn't even leave the state. It was never an escape route. Years later, I must have been around 10 years old, my mother would tell me she tried to walk in front of a car on that road. They wouldn't hit me, she told me. They just kept going. It made me so angry. What could I say? I pictured her lurching out into the headlights, the sharp swerve, close enough to blow her hair back, her teeth bared, growling at the receding taillights. I'm glad you didn't get hit, I said. A necessary thing to say, heartfelt, limp as the day-old bouquet of wildflowers I'd once picked for her and left on the dashboard. I mean, you have told us so much in what, maybe 15 lines of text. This tells you so much about your relationship, what she's like, what you're like, what the setting is, what the scene is. I mean, it's really astounding when you think about it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. No, it takes a lot to do that and evoke a whole tone. And, you know, you can't help but root for you, no matter which piece of this book you look at. I mean, it's amazing. Limp as a day-old bouquet that you gave her, which is like, I'm just seeing that whole thing. In terms of how you structured the book and the smaller sections, the longer sections, the deep dive, the reflections on memory itself, tell me a little more about that and how you decided to attack this project.
Yeah. Well, when I started with the memories and events that were like replaying in my head all the time, mostly for catharsis, I think, but also they were the ones with the most details. So like Ben's kidnapping and, you know, living with Mark and certain times when we lived at the barn, they were just so vivid in my head. And I thought about them constantly. And I was always trying to frame them for myself. And so I think writing those down was important for me. Like in part, just it felt like I was putting it down. Like I didn't have to carry it all the time, which actually worked, which was surprising. And then I kind of built out from there. I tried to do all the scaffolding, like connect the memories. And then I knew I wanted to have reflections, like present day reflections, in part because it was important for me to show that when I was like younger and I was going through something, I wanted to capture how it felt and what I thought about it. I also wanted to be able to step away and say, like, this is what I know now, and here's how I've changed and grown and learned to appreciate myself and other people and that kind of thing. And it ended up kind of replicating the way I think, which is just very full of loops and digressions. Yeah, the Rube Goldberg machine comparison that I use in there is really how my mind works. It's just a bunch of stuff leading to other stuff, which I know is how everybody thinks. I just like to think that mine is really fast and weird. Yeah, I wanted also to give people short breaks because I know it's heavy content. If someone's reading and it's just like suffering and reflection, that can be really hard. And I wanted to have little landing pads where I can say, like, you're here with me. I'm okay. It's going to be hard again, but just for this little moment, we get to be okay in the present. Yeah.
There was one part of your story when you say something to the reader, like, I know you might want to put the book down and just like not face this anymore, but I don't have that luxury. You said it a lot better. And that was so powerful to me. You're like, I couldn't just put this aside. This was my life. Anyway, as someone who read it and just like had my hand over my heart, and I did have to like put it down just to like take a deep breath and dive back in a few times, because your story is so, I mean, the stuff you've been through is really astounding that you had to go through it, and amazing that you are who you are. And, you know, I don't know what you attribute that to. It's genetics or just you or resilience or what, but what do you think it is?
It's really hard to say. I think sometimes I feel complicated because like I really wanted to get out of the environment I was in, and I wanted things to be better, and I wanted to stop being like scared all the time and unsure of what was coming next, which to a certain extent is just part of life. But sometimes I've thought, like, you know, I worked really hard. I worked really hard to like get through school and get into college. And like build savings for myself and move and those kinds of things. But at the same time, there are a lot of people I love who are still in those environments and dealing daily with that level of like fear and insecurity and just struggling. And I know that they want it out as badly as I do. And for that reason, I don't think that there's any kind of like special thing about me. I think it's just a series of circumstances and good timing and, having them there holding me up and supporting me, even as they made the same mistakes they made. Yeah, it's kind of an impossible question to answer that, like, how do you feel good about getting out of something that so many people you love are still in or have died from or are still dealing with the trauma of every day?
Well, sorry for an impossible question, but I loved how you answered it.
It's a good question.
I mean, none of us really knows how we all turned out the way we did, right? It's only conjecture, right? Maybe because of this, maybe because of that, maybe in spite of this or in spite of that. And it's all just a mishmash, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to think about. There was a book called American Daughter. I don't know if you read that. And the author like went on to have a career and this and that. And some of her brothers like just couldn't, they had mental illness. And, she's like, it was so random. Like it could have not been me, it's just the same thing hits a family and it sort of lands in different ways on different people. And that dictates the rest of your life. Anyway.
Yeah.
I don't mean to belabor this point, but anyway.
No, it's interesting. It's hard not to just sit in it and ask it over and over.
Yeah. When you were writing the book, did you look to mentors or other people who had written books about sort of childhood trauma or all of this? Like who inspired you, if anybody?
Yeah, I definitely I have a book or a bookshelf that's just, I think I've put them all back with the other books. So it's hard to remember which ones exactly, but Kiese Lehman's Heavy was definitely one I went back to. Jill Chrisman's Dark Room, In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado, and then some psychology books. So like The Body Keeps the Score. I think it's called It Didn't Start With You, and Why Does He Do That by Lundy Bancroft. I had a bunch of books that I went back to all the time. Like, how do you deal with, and of course, The Glass Castle. Like, how do you deal with writing about people you love, who you have really complex relationships with, who may have hurt you, who may have harmed other people you love? Like, how do you tackle it? How do you start a scene even? How do you get out of the scene? Yeah, I have almost used those books to dust. They're all creased and folded over and have peanut butter spills in them because of who I am.
Wow, that's wonderful. Well, I think you have taken something that has been quote unquote done, right? Writing about childhood, writing about trauma, writing about coming through things, describing really painful narrative and all of that. And yet I feel that you've done this in a unique way. And even the form itself, the form that it took, the way that it's told, the different perspectives, I don't know. I think it's really original and unique and amazing. But
thank you.
That's just me. You talked about talking about family and being sympathetic to people who may still be hurting other people. And how do you wrestle with both sides of the coin, right? When you love someone, how do you deal with the mistakes perhaps, or the poor decisions, but also maintain that sense of, unending love? And how do you then put it into words that other people can pick up and get exactly what you mean? Talk a little bit about, having to write your brother and your mother in particular as characters, right? That they're characters in the scenes, and that yet they're also people that you probably, you put the book down and then call or something. So how does that work?
Yeah. I think this is a thing that everyone decides for themselves, and there's no like good blanket answer. Personally, for me, writing the book helped me understand my mom better, in part because we can't really communicate very well, like over the phone or in person. She just has memory issues and, disconnect from reality. So just reflecting on some of the stuff we went through, things that I, thought about every day and ruminated on, but actually writing them and really asking myself, like, how did she get through that? Like, she was in her early 20s, living in a car with a little kid who she probably felt a lot of feelings about just because of my conception and not having money and all of the things that already come with raising children, which to me seems like an impossible thing. So yeah, learning to understand like the full extent of what she was going through helped me appreciate, like, if even half the things that happened to her happened to me and continued to happen, and I was raising a kid and dealt with, like, I don't know, the after effects of a long life of drug use and trauma, and there is a version of me where I could make just as many mistakes. I could treat people the way she treated me. And I think learning to understand her and appreciate what she went through also helps me think like everyone's capable of harming people and giving into your most defensive and reactive instincts. And if I don't want to become that, if I don't want to, give into the part of my brain sometimes that's like, everyone's going to leave you, so you better leave first, or any number of those kinds of thoughts, then I really do have to appreciate, like, what was it like for the people who harmed me to get to the point where they made those choices, and how do I not make those choices? Yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
It doesn't even matter. I don't even know. I don't even remember what I asked, but I loved what you had to say. I mean, I just feel like you are the most empathetic person. Like, seriously, I mean, that is the epitome of empathy right there, putting yourself in their shoes, even though you could so easily take a different tact and feel a lot of different feelings. It's amazing. Really wonderful.
Thank you.
Tell me about what you're working on now. Are you working on more poetry? Has that made a comeback? Short stories, essays? Are you writing anything else for us?
Yeah, I wrote there's like a publication day essay that I'm pretty excited about. I wrote about horror movies, which is one of my favorite topics. And yeah, poetry has made kind of a comeback. When I was working on the book, I was so in the mind of prose that I didn't really write a lot of poetry. But yeah, lately I've been getting back into it, and I've written some stuff that I'm like, wow. I like writing poetry. I can't believe I stopped doing this for so long. And then, yeah, I'm working on hopefully my second book, which is about, gosh, it's hard to say concisely, but if I really had to sum it up, it's about how mental health and physical health combine and manifest in religious settings. Yeah, that could be its own whole Zoom call.
That was another concise answer, though. That was good.
Thank you.
What advice do you have for aspiring authors?
I always say take care of yourself, because I think writing is so magical, and when you love writing, it just feels natural. Like, that's how I process things. Sometimes, even as I'm having a conversation, I think about how I would be formatting the dialogue or adding in details from the room and that kind of thing. I love writing. I also think that, like anything, too much of it or doing it wrong, it's hard to quantify how doing it wrong means anything. But I think it's important to check in with yourself and say, like, how is it affecting me to be writing this right now? And is it okay that I'm feeling this? Do I need to sit with this, or am I sitting in it too long, and do I need a break from it? Yeah, I think I would tell writers, just check in with yourself. Like, feel free to get lost in the words, because that's such a wonderful thing to do. Just also know when to step back out and be in your body and ask yourself questions, and just make sure that you're okay, because writing is part of being a person, but it's also good to think I'm a person before I'm a writer. Or maybe not. I don't know.
Well, what's clear is that you are definitely a writer with a capital W. And I hope that you run into your teachers and send them the book and show them what happened, and that you get everything that you want out of taking this book on tour and being around readers and using your craft for good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Well, congrats, Brittany. So excited.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.